us with us. Will you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Kate Gladstone. I am the founder and CEO of Handwriting Repair, Handwriting That Works, and the author of Read Cursive Fast, now in its second printing from National Autism Resources. And I'm here today to talk about handwriting from a dyslexic's eye view because I am one of the very few handwriting consultants out there, maybe the only one, who wasn't even writing legibly, let alone even reading cursive before when I was in graduate school, because I happened to be, although not known when I was a child, but diagnosed later, dyslexic and dysgraphic and ADHD and autistic.
You're all kinds of neurodiverse.
Basically, yes, so I have certain observations, let's say, from the other end of the clinician's desk about what is going on in handwriting, as well as other subjects. I've had to deal with helping people in other subjects that have come up in handwriting, but of course my main focus has been handwriting, and I would like to leave it to you to ask the questions, and I'll just shoot my mouth off from there.
Okay, so what do you do with your handwriting procedures?
What I do with my handwriting procedures, of course, is first to look at the individual's handwriting, and the individual could be anyone from a preschool child just learning the alphabet to an older person who has had difficulty all his life or her life. For instance, until electronic prescribing came in, a very large number of my clients were MDs, and a very large number of them actually were known to be dyslexic, dysgraphic, or otherwise neurodivergent, which hadn't hindered them in being MDs, except that it added to the notorious handwriting difficulties of the profession. In fact, a significant number of people whose workforce my guests were referred to me by hospitals because those doctors were facing death by penmanship suits, death by handwriting suits, or because the hospital actually was at risk in some cases of having its accreditation lifted. And there were times when I had to work professionally, actually, either with individuals or with groups. And in one instance, believe it or not, I was at a hospital in California. I don't want to name it, but one of the largest hospital networks in that state, teaching a class, when all of a sudden people walked in suits. I was assuming they were maybe some doctors who just had been tied up and couldn't join the class when it started, but had to come along as my classes had a roster that you could walk in. But I was told when they arrived that they actually were from the legal department because they were there, because one room down the hall had people from a place called JACO, Joint Commission on Education and Health Organizations, basically, and people were talking to them about JACO wanted to de-accredit the place, and the legal team was trying to prove that, no, you shouldn't, because literally, as we speak, as you're going to bring up all these people because of folks they've harmed and even killed. We have a woman down in the auditorium, working with these same culprits to rectify the situation. So that's why all the suits were marching in that fine morning.
Oh, wow.
Fortunately, I was able to get them involved, and in fact, to this day, the befores and afters on my website, handwritingthatworks.com, include some that I had permission to post from that particular session. And it was actually in that instance a 90-minute class, and you'll see a huge difference in the befores and afters.
Do you do one-on-one sessions?
I definitely do one-on-one sessions, and these days by Zoom as well as by other means. Of course, with Zoom, I try to follow up, if not by personal meetings, then by email and leaving people samples that they have to write and assignments to get back to me. I like to meet in person, and when I do meet in person, that's been less possible now than it was before, BC before COVID. However, my practice has been, wherever possible, even for one individual, to go to the person's site. One, because this means I don't have to worry about setting up my office. Two, because it means I can be with the person in his or her environment at home, work, or school. And three, most people who need my services have other needs, and they have other parts of their life. Handwriting is not the only thing. In other words, if I'm working with an 11-year-old who has dyslexia, he or she probably also has soccer, therapy, tutoring, remedial stuff, probably things that he or she does in his or her life and doesn't want to cut out, like a hobby or a special interest or just time with friends and family. I want to minimize the time that they spend with me. For the same reason, I very much prefer, when I'm working with anyone of school age, including college age, to work on weekends, especially long weekends, 3 or 4 day weekends, or vacations such as Thanksgiving vacation, winter vacation, summer vacation, so that the person does not have to contend both with schoolwork and with me. Even though it's possible to repair handwriting, as I call it, while one is doing other things, it's difficult. It's rather like trying to repair a bicycle while you are riding it.
Yeah, no kidding. So thinking about your career, what is the biggest success story you can think of that comes to mind?
The very biggest success story happened for me about 10 years ago in a small town in Massachusetts, where I was actually paid on the upshot out of the IEP fund, which I hadn't expected to be. And I was called in desperation by the mother of a 16-year-old. The mother was actually someone I happened to know somewhat, as she is a professional calligrapher and I am among other things a semi-professional calligrapher. And at the time we were in the same internet group, actually, which was a calligraphy interest group. It's similar to what they have now on Reddit, but Reddit did not exist back then.
Yeah.
And her daughter had dyslexia and also had some other issues, which I don't want to go into it, other than that they were, a variety of issues unrelated to dyslexia. And this daughter was 16, was in school, and had been diagnosed with dyslexia at an early age. Had a tutor who worked with her on every subject, including handwriting, but on handwriting, the tutor's work had been unsuccessful, even though the tutor had been trained by one of the major dyslexia groups out there, which I don't want to name, as they have a table, a presence at this conference, and I am not into bad mouthing.
Right,
That's
right.
Even if I don't see eye to eye with them, we are all trying our best with the best that we have.
Absolutely.
But in any case, it seemed that the young lady's handwriting actually became worse the more and more diligently she followed the tutor's recommendations. So the family decided to get the tutor very angry by discharging the tutor from handwriting, which I would take over while the tutor continued her very able work helping the young lady in other areas. Now, it was important for me and for the family, for this young lady, I will call her Kitty, which is not her name, but is close to it. I don't want to reveal the name, as she is now a young professional, I understand, in her chosen field. And, well, anyway, Kitty wanted at the time to be a medical missionary in emerging nations. I understand her plans did change afterwards, for which handwriting would be important because, remember, she could not count on, this was a little before there were iPhones and such, she could not count on there being batteries and portals, under every palm tree. And this was actually probably more than 10 years ago, because the other thing was that Kitty was 16. She was going to be taking the SAT that year, and there had been rumors that the SAT was going to bring in a handwritten essay that would be a major part of the grade. Now, the school basically that she was in was a very trauma-informed school, and she had been through a lot of traumas in her life. And the school did not really focus on handwriting and would downplay some other academics because they were very, very much into establishing your mental health and your personal balance. So, as I recall, as the school day was described to me, although I did not see observe, let's say a math class or a spelling lesson, 2/3 of it might be let's breathe and ground and center and imagine the golden light percolating all through our bodies, before they got to the actual, algebra or Latin roots or whatever it may have been. I'm sure that the people in that school learned a lot. I have been through enough difficulties that I do not at all discount the importance of maintaining a psychological balance. And as it is, the young lady had a tested 160 IQ, so she was doing very well in many areas, but handwriting was a struggle. So anyway, the mother called up and arranged for me to spend what I call a long week during summer. I wasn't, yeah, I think it was during summer vacation. What I mean by long week is a full week plus the weekends on either end so that so I was providing her with 9 hours of actually live-in help. And I actually prefer to provide live-in help when I can. This was well before Zoom. Don't get that many live-in jobs nowadays, but I do treasure them when they come, and this was not the only one. What my typical procedure is to, make sure we're all rested, get up at a reasonable hour, start work at 10 so that the breakfast dishes and all can be cleared away, work until perhaps 3 and 4. If we beat our goals, knock off early, but at any event, knock off, and then we can spend the rest of the day relaxing, go to the movies, go to the mall, make some time to do whatever homework for the next day. And this way, people are able to relax, but they're still getting very concentrated instruction. And to lower the financial burden, I like to invite other people besides the identified client. In this instance, it was the young lady's parents, both because they were curious. They did not have handwriting issues themselves. Certainly, the mother and the calligrapher did not. But I wanted them around to see what I was doing, so that they could continue after I went home. Because if I can train them to do what their daughter is doing, then they can work with their daughter or their son. So in this case, it was their daughter, and have some, continuity so that it doesn't have to be me. What I want is to teach myself how to do the job. I want to not have to be the handwriting lady because I would like there to be a culture where everyone knew how to have handwriting, how to help another person, just as most people know how to help a little baby learn how to speak.
No, I love that. I think that's great.
And if we all knew the basics of handwriting, just as we generally know the basics of how to help a child learn to walk and talk, and when they're a little older, how to help them learn how to take care of the bed at the table, and all the other tasks, then I could relax, and I could spend a lot more time doing things that are not handwriting, much as I love handwriting and love the calligraphy that I do.
Yes.
So, in any case, I was up there. She was a very apt student, and most of the days that we were up there, we in fact finished our goals for the day between 12 and 2. But the scary thing was that the woman whom I had ousted from the handwriting portion of her work with the student, she was a little upset because now she was being paid a little less by the school district for the IEP, and I was being paid, a few $1,000 that she wasn't being paid. And of course, she knew that I was, again, dyslexic. She had some notion that dyslexics couldn't be qualified to write, let alone teach writing, even though she'd seen my writing. She had seen me write. We'd written a couple letters back, not much, but I wanted to establish, my good faith with her. So at one point, I actually wrote her a note, and to get it to her, email was just starting up in those days, so I actually wrote something and sent it as an attachment to an email. I'm going to, her name was not Mara, but that's someone who's going to call her Mara. So, dear Mara, I, hope we can work together as friends. And I wrote it out as a little note and attached it. And apparently she was outraged, and apparently according to the mother and according to the daughter, according to Kitty, whom I met, the mother's name, if in case I have to mention the name of the story, I'm going to call her Janet, which was again not her name, but sure. Okay. Well, according to Janet, the mom, and according to Kitty, the daughter, the woman who had a very, expensive certification from a very well-known place was outraged because my handwriting was legible. From what she saw, it looked as if it would be rapid. which it is. I have been tested to write at 150 legible letters per minute, which is
Wow,
pretty
that's
high.
very good.
And not unknown among my students, by the way. But she was outraged because, according to her training, the only writing that dyslexics were able to do, according to her very expensive and very professional training, was that dyslexics have to join every letter. It has to all be in cursive. It has to be the kind of cursive where everything starts at the baseline, goes up. And the big thing with her was that she believed that dyslexics were physically and mentally incapable of writing a letter T unless it was as tall as, let's say, letter L or D. And her notion was that dyslexics, she had been taught in her very expensive training, are cognitively incapable of understanding concepts like in between or in the middle. They only understand big or little. And which one I think is an incredible accusation to make of a young lady with 160 IQ, you know.
Right.
Number two, even her own program didn't fit this. In other words, if you're saying you can't make a T that is shorter than the other ascenders, which is important for legibility reasons, as I'd love to demonstrate for you if we ever do video. I'd love to go and do series with you on handwriting issues if you'd like and demonstrate specific points as visuals. You will never get this anywhere else. Well, if you can't do a T that's shorter than an L, which pretty much every type font has for very good and sufficient reasons, you could look at literally all the type fonts we're looking at right here and look at how the T is. Well, what happens to things like I dots and J dots, which also are at a partial height,
Right.
and which certainly in her programs they were. Well, I challenged her on this, and at one point, you know, since we were all, going out and enjoying ourselves in the afternoon, at one point, the family not only took me out to dinner, but took Mara, the tutor, out to dinner. And Mara was going on about, oh, you can't possibly be teaching Kitty to go and do that. Oh, she's not mentally capable of doing that. We cannot inflict this on dyslexics. No dyslexic could do it. But Mara, I do it, and I am a dyslexic. Do you want, I could refer you to my doctor. He was still alive at the time the doctor diagnosed me, although now has passed on, as I recall. Well, no, that won't be necessary. I don't want to talk about this. So I said, Mara, can you help me understand? So if dyslexics cannot understand anything that involves between or intermediate or partial in the middle, it only can be extremes, black and white, top and bottom, big and little. Does that mean that when we have a dyslexic and we're telling them a fairy tale, it has to be Goldilocks and the Two Bears? I'd really love to hear your version.
Interesting.
And she just sort of stared,
Yeah.
like, ooh. She had this sort of, frightened fawn in the headlights expression. She hadn't seen that coming. And believe me, I can tell you, Kitty could understand Goldilocks and the Three Bears or any other, literature that she either read or was told. Anyway,
You're obviously very passionate.
so while I was up there, I didn't even get to the best part.
Okay.
While I was up there, I was told on the way up, Kate, when you come up, you're going to have to talk to the IEP committee to see how to justify what they're going to pay you, because otherwise, the mom is going to have to pay you. So you don't want to have to. And they said the big thing the IEP committee is going to be saying is that there's no need for handwriting in the modern world, blah, 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 blah. Now, this was, before all the research on why handwriting is neurologically important and beneficial. But as it happened, it was the year that the SAT, as I said, was going to implement, the handwritten essay, proviso. And I happened to be going up. They lived in a small town near Boston. I took the bus up there. I do not drive for reasons relating to my own motor control. So I do not drive or own a car. So I was going up by bus because it was close enough that bus was more practical. The trains didn't go to that particular little tiny town. And on the way up there, the bus happened to pull over at some medium-sized town so we could all, grab lunch and have a break, bathroom break. Sure. And I went in and I bought a copy of the Boston Globe because on the front page was the announcement of that the SAT committee, the SAT people had just decided the handwritten essay would be part of it. And I knew that once I got into this little tiny small town, 2 hours later, I would be talking to the IEP people. So I walked into the IEP committee holding the Boston Globe and waving it around like a little flag and said, all right, now I want you to tell Jana and Kitty how handwriting is going to be unimportant for someone who wants to head to medical school, be a medical missionary in not so electronicized parts of the world. Let's see you tell her that. And that probably made a difference.
Oh,
Okay, whatever good angel runs the Boston Globe was was obviously on my side that day. Whoever was the guardian angel of the Boston Globe. Well, if you think that's crazy, the last chapter was the aftermath. After I went home, having fixed the young lady's handwriting, she, as I said, continued to see the dyslexia tutor for other subjects such as math and history and science and whatnot. And she would go every day to her tutor's home and wait in the waiting room. Nara, the tutor, worked out of her home, and she would typically write in her journal. Now that she could write, she enjoyed keeping her journal. And one day, as she was writing in her private diary, the tutor came in ready to open up, saw her in the waiting room, looked at her while she was writing away, and as she was writing, said to her, "Oh, come now, dear, you can't possibly write as nicely as all that," while the young lady was in the act of writing. Well, guess what? You can imagine just how long the tutor was retained for other subjects after that, which I'm informed was not 1 second.
Oh, wow.
Wow, that's
You did.
great story.
Yes.
My goodness.
Amazing
You're
one.
very passionate about what you
And
do.
if you're listening out there, any of you, I didn't use your real names, but you know who you are.
Well, thank you so much for coming by and speaking
Yes,
with
we
us
love
and sharing your
this.
stories.
Thank
We
you.
hope you have a good rest of your time
We
here.
certainly do. And may I urge you to send someone to table 206 to see what I have to offer.
Okay.
See what my table partner, Jonathan Dubé, has to offer at his table.
Okay.
He would be a marvelous speaker, and I think he would just love. He has so many, many stories, and he would be a marvelous, marvelous guest.
Yes.
And by the way, if you want to hear another podcast, if you want me to come by tomorrow, I don't know if are we doing any recording tomorrow?
I think so.
I'll tell you what, I don't know what your schedule is like, but I could either come by tomorrow or this afternoon and actually tell you about Read Cursive Fast. Or if you don't want me to hog the mic, just come by with the mic and come to my table and record me there if you prefer.
I wish we still had our remote control mics, but we
It
don't.
didn't work real
Yeah.
well.
Tell you what, if you
Okay.
want to take a phone and get an interview by phone,
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm willing to adopt and adapt. Most people have a phone. Most iPhone mics are decent, and that way you can take photos of me. And if you wanted me to
Right.
speak specifically on any of the specific handwriting issues I have dealt with, that may not have been great for just this one-off podcast. But I am hoping, as I said, to do many more.
Sure. Yes, we will be in touch with you. Thank you so much.
very much, and hope everyone enjoys the conference.
Yes.
All
Thank
right.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your time.